So our buddy Cenk Uygur of TYT wrote an article absolutely destroying Nancy Pelosi and calling her out directly, which, man, that felt good reading that. Because you got to understand, this is never allowed in mainstream media. And here he is. He wrote in The Hill, and you bet your ass some eyeballs in Washington, D.C., in those elite circles, they will be reading this article. So I think that's great. Anyway, it's titled Young Turks Uygur, Nancy Pelosi is not a progressive. Here's what he says. Why did House Speaker Nancy Pelosi not defend Representative Ilhan Omar by name recently when she was attacked by President Trump? Why did Speaker Pelosi attend a dinner with Democratic donors where they discussed how to thwart Senator Sanders, arguably the most progressive person in Congress? Why did Pelosi minimize the progressives in Congress by saying there are just 5 of them? I'll solve the big mystery for you. She isn't a progressive. Not even close. In fact, she works against every progressive priority in Congress. The only people who still buy into the fiction that she is a progressive are her friends in the Democratic Party and the Washington media. Republicans often run campaign ads featuring Pelosi that sometimes are so effective that the Democratic candidate in the race has to denounce her. The mainstream media makes the mistake of thinking this is because the American people find her to be too liberal. In reality, they have a completely different problem with her. They find her to be too elitist. That's why it was so tone-deaf of her to answer when asked why she should be House Speaker, that she is, quote, the biggest fundraiser in the country. Yes, that's exactly the problem. To regular people, that signals she's working with the elites to rip them off. People in Washington might find that to be unfair. Politicians are just listening to the rich, not following their orders. They're honorable people, not unduly influenced by the money they receive. No one outside of Washington believes this. In fact, 93% of Americans believe that politicians serve their donors over their voters. This is an uncomfortable fact for people in Washington, but a fact nonetheless. So when Democrats in the Washington media see that Pelosi has raised $568 million for the Democratic Party since 2002, they see a superstar. Voters, on the other hand, see corruption. No one outside of Washington believes that people give $500 million to a politician and that the politician doesn't deliver for those donors. In Washington, it is heresy to speak ill of Pelosi, let alone suggest she is not a progressive. She has been described as the strongest and most effective speaker of modern times and a masterful legislative tactician. And oh yes, a master legislator. The author of that last quote being Nancy Pelosi. In the rest of the country, she is deeply unpopular. That, too, is a fact. A Real Clear Politics average of polls has her at 15 points underwater and arguably less popular than Donald Trump. To be fair, people in Congress usually do worse than the president on average. You should see Senator Mitch McConnell's ratings. However, it is fair to conclude that the country finds her less than masterful. It's one thing to prove she is unpopular and that she takes a lot of money from the top donors in the country. It's another to show she is not a progressive champion. What decides if someone is a progressive or not? The answer is obvious. The policies do. For example, one of the first things Pelosi absolutely insisted in putting into the House rules was pay-go. That's a rule that says you must raise taxes or cut spending if you propose any legislation that adds to the deficit. Progressives despise that rule. It threatens to block every major progressive priority in Congress. Why would a progressive fight for that rule? There's a very simple answer to that. They wouldn't. What about her brilliant progressive success of getting Romney Care passed? With a supermajority, she got a Heritage Foundation plan passed. Yes, the Affordable Care Act was originally conceived by a conservative think tank and passed in Massachusetts by then-Governor Mitt Romney. Progressives couldn't even get a public option inserted into what used to be a right-wing proposal. Master legislator indeed. Now, let's get to the main event. Progressive priorities for the next 2 years. Would anyone doubt that the progressive base clearly wants Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and college for all? Will Speaker Pelosi fight for any of these? No, in reality, she very likely will fight against all of them. She disagrees with the progressive base, and that's why she is not a progressive. If it isn't clear enough, she further clarified by repeating a Republican talking point on Medicare for all by asking, quote, how are you going to pay for that? Then she sent one of her top aides to assure the health insurance industry that they would be working against Medicare for all. Any chance Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would have done that? Then she went on to say this about the Green New Deal, quote, the Green Dream, or whatever they call it. Nobody knows what it is, but they're for it, right? Mitch McConnell would have had trouble being so condescending to a progressive proposal. Finally, someone could make the argument that she is secretly in favor of these proposals, but thinks she can't get them passed because of moderate Democrats. This is Speaker Pelosi's most common trick, playing to the most conservative denominator. She is proud of keeping her caucus together, but how does she do that? By browbeating progressives to back down, by saying that Democrats in purple districts must be protected so everyone must vote for the version of the bill least offensive to conservative, corporate-friendly Democrats. She will not propose or fight for or pass any of those huge progressive priorities. In fact, she will work hard to block them. She's not a progressive, and she'll prove it over the next 2 years. Hot diggity damn, son. Hot diggity damn. I mean, hats off to you, Cenk. I don't even want to add to this with any further commentary because he just laid it all out there. I mean, I think it's relatively clear. When you go down the list of progressive priorities, she's in favor of, if I'm being kind, and this is really kind, she's maybe in favor of 20% of the progressive priorities. So when you're against your own base, and the overwhelming majority of the country too, according to the polling, on 80% of the left agenda, you're not what you say you are. It's pretty simple. And it's time for new leadership in the House. And also, let me say, it does pain me when otherwise good politicians like Ro Khanna or AOC, when they kind of bend the knee a little bit to Pelosi. It does. It bothers me. It bothers me. Now, again, to be fair to them, that could just be them playing politics while still pushing for the right policies. I would not doubt Ro Khanna or AOC on actual policy. 90% of the time, they're correct. But it does, I always cringe just a little bit. Because the reality of the situation is, she's not your friend. And she's not your friend because she's not the American people's friend. And she's not the American people's friend because she's going to fight us tooth and nail on all of our important policy priorities. So instead of, genuflecting at the altar of established power, how about we take the approach of flexing our muscle and letting Nancy Pelosi know that you may have the name recognition, but the left-wing base, we have an army of politically engaged volunteers who will let you know when you step out of line. So don't try us. We got our eye on you. Don't try us, because we will mobilize and we will get involved and we will do anything in the realm of what's reasonable and moral and possible to get our policies implemented. That includes direct action. That includes, swarming the offices of these politicians to make them do the right thing. It's time for us to be involved and to put the pedal to the metal and to not take no for an answer. And that means recognizing people who aren't on our side when they tell us they're not on our side. And I don't care that you have a D by your name. I don't care that you're the Speaker of the House and you're you've been in leadership forever. I don't care about any of that stuff. What I care about is, are you going to be our ally on the policies, and will you help us fight for them and get them implemented? Yes or no? If you say no to that, okay. We're clear. I know what you are. You know what we are, and it's on. But it would behoove you to not recognize what Pelosi is and respond and react accordingly. And Cenk Uygur absolutely nailed this in the article, and I want people on the left to all take the blinders off and realize politics is wielding power to implement your agenda. And the way you do that is by being relatively ruthless and Machiavellian when need be. So if this means going after the Democratic Speaker to get Medicare for All implemented, you bet your ass we're going to do that. And there is no, here's what I'm sick of. There's going to be no, we gotta wait for a better day to push for the proper policy because right now, here's a fucking laundry list of excuses that are not actually true, and we want you to heal because you gotta fall in line and just be the good little left base that you are and shut up and support the politicians. Now, how about we are your boss and you will do what we want you to do, and that's the end of the conversation. How about that? Things are changing, and we're going to make them change faster because we're all going to get involved. But Cenk Uygur nailed it on Nancy Pelosi. By the way, nobody in Washington, D.C. will read this and think he's right. Except you'll notice something. They will not be able to substantively respond to his arguments. They won't be able to do it. They'll just have scorn. Ah! How could you? Did you just say Nancy Pelosi is not a progressive? Everybody knows she's a progressive, yes? Okay. Proceed. What's your argument? I didn't say I would make an argument. I just said everybody knows Nancy Pelosi is a progressive. I can see like the Morning Joe idiots reading this and being outraged and having no coherent response, but just being like, obviously he's wrong. What does he know? Yeah. So you guys know the truth of the situation, and it's time to recognize her for what she is and respond accordingly.